Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Levin, chairman of Work Better Now, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this next episode of Working Better Now. And we're really fortunate today to be joined here by Nelson Tepfer. Nelson is the co-founder and CEO of Pro CFO Partners. Nelson, welcome and thanks for joining.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
Nelson, give us, why don't we start off with a little bit of information on your background? So, how you started your career and how it progressed over time.
Sure. So, it's funny where I find myself today because way back when I actually went to school, I was actually planning on going into finance and Wall Street. And I ended up in small business because when I was graduating and had some offers from different firms, it was like, well, Wall Street's not going anywhere. This business opportunity sounds interesting. Let's see what happens. And I can always go back to Wall Street. And I never made it there. So been in the business world basically my entire career, small to mid-sized companies, from startups through $500 million in revenue. That first opportunity I took, we grew that company to one of the largest in the tri-state area. So I had a great time continuing to grow and scale organizations. Ended up in the CFO title for several different organizations. And then my last full-time CFO role, a friend of mine had reached out to me and said a friend of his is having some trouble with his company. Can I have a conversation, maybe give him some advice, which ended up turning into a year-long interim CFO role, which I truly enjoyed, helping an organization do that. I found the experience and expertise I had was like magic to a company like this. So I found it really engaging to learn a new company, new business, new industry, and be able to provide that insight that will help them continue to grow and scale. So I decided I wanted to do a whole lot more of that. So I started doing this on my own for about 8 years as a part-time fractional virtual consultant, whatever title people are comfortable with at the CFO level. We look at it as part-time CFO because we take on the role of the CFO just on a part-time basis. But I know there's all kinds of fun terminology out there. Did it on my own for a number of years and realized there has to be a way to do this bigger and better. And I went looking and I didn't really like many of the options that existed out there. That just didn't feel they provided much value to the CFO or to the clients, which as a result led me down the path of co-founding this company, which we launched in January of 2020.
So right before the pandemic. Gotcha. By the way, the reason I was smiling earlier is, and I don't know if you know this, but I actually was a CFO myself 20 plus years ago. And I know exactly what you mean. You can come into some companies that are otherwise well run.
Yeah.
But the financial information is a mess. And probably people like you and I, when you see company with a messy financial situation, you look at it, you're like, how are they making decisions? And somehow they do. But then, of course, when they get access to someone like yours expertise, it's really amazing what they can do. So
it is fascinating to me, the similarities and differences of startup companies, 2 million, 20 million, and $200 million companies, the issues that they face, how similar some of them are, just a question of scale.
Yeah. So tell us, thanks for the background. Tell us about what Pro CFO Partners does.
So Pro CFO Partners, as I've started to say semi-jokingly, we're a little bit different in our space, even though we shouldn't be. Meaning for us, it is about how do we help organizations build their finance and accounting function. So not only is it systematic, sustainable, and scalable, but it's actually built to support their growth and goals. It's about building a framework for financial management and growth. So that's what if you really boil down the role of the CFO into its simplest form, that's really what that is supposed to be providing for the organization. And I say that because I've spoken numerous times in front of business owners and in front of groups of CFOs, and it is amazing how varied the definition of CFO ends up being across that environment. I speak to in front of groups of business owners of 15 to 20, and I ask the room, how many of you have a CFO? And about half of them will raise their hand. And it's like, okay, great, then this should be simple. What does a CFO do? And the same two things happens almost every single time. First is dead silence in the room, and the second is a look of panic on about half the people who raise their hand, like, I hope he doesn't call on me. And so what we focus on is what is the role of the CFO in this organization? It's about building this framework correctly to support the company. So we dive in and out of several different areas, obviously, but it's all about where's the company trying to get to, and what is our role in supporting them to help them achieve those goals.
Gotcha. So let me ask you this question, because I've seen this my entire career. What percentage of people who say they are a CFO in a small and mid-sized business are really, in fact, controllers?
Far too many. I don't want to throw out a number because it might be insulting to some people, but it's far too many is the short answer. And frankly, it's not always about skill. It's just as much on the business owner as it is on that professional. The business owner has no idea what they should be getting from this role. The best example I have of this was a business owner who tells me, Nelson, this company is too big for me to run on gut instinct alone. Now, I love to see a CEO who feels free enough to share that sentiment with me. What made that one in particular so much more interesting, that was a 300-person print manufacturing company with a controller and 9 people in his accounting department, and that was still the way he felt. Now, was he really running it on gut instinct? No. He was a skilled professional, well-trained, been in the business for a number of years. He's not really running it on gut instinct, but he feels like he is because he doesn't have that strategic partner helping him guide the business and giving him the insight he needs to make the decisions that he has to make.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks for that. You walk into companies. I know you're growing like wildfire. By the way, what before I ask the question, what regions do you guys serve companies in?
So we have clients currently in 36 different states, with companies ranging in size from funded startups all the way up to, I think our largest client is more than 400 million in revenue. At last count, we're in 28 or 29 different industries. And I joke with some people that number seems to keep growing because they keep making up new industries.
That's a whole nother discussion, but
yeah, it is.
not as interesting as I think this next question or the response to the next question. So you come into companies of all shapes and sizes. Let's talk about companies, let's say, in the $5 to $50 million space, right? So not a startup, but not a much larger company. You or somebody on your team, because you have a pretty sizable team right now, you or somebody else on your team comes into one of these companies. What are most companies missing out on right now when it comes to the financial function not being where it needs to be?
Oh boy. Again, at its simplest, it's probably about what is the insight they need to have to make the decisions that they have to, if you're really boiling it down. Yeah. Because when we find very often, we'll give you another fun example that really highlights that and exactly what you're referring to. This company in their monthly meeting that they review their financials, they review this 4-page P&L on a monthly basis. And after 3 months of one of the CFOs of my team sitting in that meeting, he basically said, enough, does this tell you anything? You're sitting here looking at this 4-page P&L. Does this tell you anything about running your business? No. So let's figure out what it is we do need to know so we can make the decisions we have to, whether you pull up KPIs or dashboards or boiling it down to whatever metric you're comfortable with or terminology you're comfortable with. But it's getting really clear on what is the insight you need to make the decisions that you have to. And you need to understand both. What are the decisions you need to make? And therefore, what's the insight you need to make those decisions? But that's what your finance and accounting function is supposed to provide. It's not just did we close the books? Of course you need to close the books. Your data needs to be accurate. It needs to be all over there. It's more what you do with that information and guiding you moving forward. If those are the goals that you've set for the organization, how are you taking all of this data and insight and information that you have and guiding those decisions as you move forward?
Gotcha. And then while certainly not as interesting as exciting, what would you say are a lot of companies in that space, are a lot of companies missing a lot of the checks and balances and processes and procedures, to avoid theft and because I can't tell you how many people I know that share the password to their bank info, with their controller or bookkeeper, and all of a sudden a couple $100,000 is missing. I mean, how often is that?
There are some real horror stories in that space. Some really sad ones that we've seen, some ones where we found it, an actual proof of it, and frankly, the business owner didn't want to know because the business owner didn't want to deal with it. And so I get that betrayal is very tough for the business owner to face around those. But the proper controls becomes a very big issue and common ones, because the things that work when you were 3 people in a basement don't work when you have 30 people or 50 people or 100 people in a whole office in a warehouse type of thing. And you have to change how you manage the company as you continue to move forward. So as I jokingly put it, a lot of what we do is helping organizations grow up, because as business owners and founders, universally, they are really, really good at delivering a product or a service. And as the company grows and scales and they now need to run a business, that doesn't necessarily translate the same way. So what we very often advise many of the business owners is, okay, where is your highest, best value to the organization? Where should you be spending your time? Because the pieces that then you can take off around all of those things become great. Take those pieces off, because the return on your time to your company is much higher around these things, and that's where you should be focusing your time. And so managing the controller and looking at all these different little pieces, that's not where you can or should be spending your time. You're not an accountant. You're not a finance person by nature. Very few business owners are. bring in that expert who can help do it, whether it's us, whether it's a CFO, whatever title, whatever resource you need, bring in that help around those pieces to put those correct controls in place. Because, yes, while embezzlement or theft is far more common than people realize, that's not usually the universal issue that we get brought in on. It's more about the lack of insight as they continue to grow and scale the company. And part of the necessary pieces to build that function correctly are the right controls in place.
Yep, gotcha. So, Nelson, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit here. Give me an example, give us an example of a recent new client, and whether it's you or somebody on your team, because I know you're really plugged in, they didn't have the right KPIs or dashboard in place. And give us an example of just, a couple of, maybe just tell us what the industry is and a couple of the things that you help them identify from a KPI or dashboard or trends perspective, and what they were able to do with that information that really moved the needle.
Sure. So, oh boy, I got to pick just one for the recent ones.
Doesn't have to be recent.
No, that's fine. I'm just thinking of some fun ones. Okay, here's a fun one we'll pick. Manufacturing company. Yeah. Growing manufacturing company. Now, manufacturing in general has lots of fun challenges. Every industry does. But scaling in a manufacturing organization is always fascinating because every company, when they start, they use some QuickBooks or something similar when they do it, which is great. It's a question of when you outgrow it. And depending on the type of manufacturing you do is when you outgrow that QuickBooks. Because QuickBooks has, is not as well set up for some scaling organizations. And so what we found out when we walked in the door was they were creating Excel sheets and tabs and all kinds of fun ways to manage different types of things. And this was a $10 to $15 million company that was doing all of this stuff in Excel because QuickBooks was just used as their financial side of things. And it became, okay, we're not capturing data correctly. There's a lot of manual entry, a lot of time, and frankly, a lot of error that goes into something like that, what that looks like. What are the pieces we need to put in place over here? So for that particular organization, it was about exploring a different ERP because QuickBooks wasn't good enough anymore. Once we came out of that, we were able to put in place on how they actually on getting a better handle on their costing, which actually allowed them to price their jobs better. And they went from winning 22% of their bids to winning more than 35% of their bids.
Wow, that's probably huge for them. Yeah, yeah, very, very, very cool. Let's switch topics a little bit. So, I believe you're a remote company. Is that correct?
Yes, we are.
And how many people in the business?
We crossed 50 a couple months ago.
Gotcha. All right. So you're running a remote only, just like us. You're running a remote only business. What are the keys to whether it? Well, let's talk. Let's check off a few things here. What are the keys to having a great culture and great productivity in terms of access to information and dialogue and all of that stuff?
So two separate things. We'll focus on culture first because that was obviously a big concern of ours in building a company entirely virtual. And frankly, it is a challenge and will remain a challenge building a culture entirely virtually. And because then it becomes about assessing fit with the culture and values of the organization, even more so than skills as we continue to grow. So culture is one that has to be more deliberate as the company grows. When your company is really small, culture is just what happens being around the business owner, being around the CEO, and that's great. But once you start crossing, whatever number of thresholds, 10, 20, 30, 40 people, culture takes on a life of its own. And unless you're directing it, it begins to direct itself. And that can get really dangerous or really horrible for some companies when it gets out of control. So for us, what we focus on is how do we support each other? So there's weekly meetings within each region around what that looks like. There's triads across the company for us to get to know each other more on a regular basis. There's workshops in person on a quarterly basis, where people will fly to different parts of the country and join for what those workshops are and how we continue to grow and support. But it has to be a lot more deliberate. It can't just be, well, it's fine, it's going well, we'll see what happens, because that kind of approach unfortunately tends to backfire or blow up at some point in time.
Yeah, gotcha. So we have the same approach, which we call it culture by design. I think we borrowed that from Jack Daly. And then I get, obviously you guys must be fully in the cloud in terms of information sharing. And can you share with us some of the tools that you use to make it easy for people, regardless of where they are to
That's where it gets interesting for us because of the role that we play with our clients and taking on the role of the CFO just on a part-time basis. So we tend to actually dive into whatever environment they're in. when we're actually working directly with clients. So as I joke with many people, me personally, I have had the privilege of working across nearly 24 ERP platforms, and they are all terrible and all wonderful, every single one of them. So it's not about the technology itself. It's more about, does this serve the function we need it to, or are we spending too much time, energy, effort, and resources working around it or band-aiding it instead of actually fixing the underlying issue? So from a technology and security perspective, we go into our client's environment when we're working with them. And if that environment isn't good enough, then we have to advise them and or bring in the expert to help them build that correct environment.
Yeah.
But for internal ourselves, our structure is a lot more basic around what this looks like. So, which is why we've been able to put in a lot of the pieces in place as a framework, and therefore then rely and move into our clients' environments when we need to as their CFO.
Gotcha. Terrific. So switching gears yet once again, I know you started working with Work Better Now, I think about 9 months or so ago.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the experience and how things are going with your Work Better Now professional.
Sure. So we've been thrilled with the professional we've been working with. Working with the organization has been incredible. We had a virtual assistant beforehand, and we chose to go to Work Better Now because we liked their approach for how you recruited for what we were looking for. It's not just, do we have a VA? Yeah, you can find VAs everywhere. It's, what are you looking for? What's going to make this person successful? What's going to make this professional successful in your organization? Let's go find you that person.
Yeah, the hand matching process. Yeah,
exactly. That's what we were really looking for. And frankly, you guys knocked it out of the park on that side of things. She's been fantastic working with these types of things. Not only just professional, but exactly a fit with what we were looking for, how she approaches her responsibilities, the things she's constantly looking to do more of, which is exactly what we were looking for in the role of that we actually built out in the organization.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about what Zara does for you guys.
So aside from playing executive assistant side of things, which is fantastic as it relates to scheduling or just getting certain things done or tasks done from an admin level, she also helps us on the recruiting, both for our organization and for some of our clients where we actually get brought in to help some of those pieces. So we built out the processes and trained her on those, and now she's able to run more of those pieces. It becomes so easy for us to say, great, we need 3 more people in this region. And we have our interview scheduled usually within a few weeks because of what we were able to train her on how to do some of that. Now, there's a lot of back and forth. Getting somebody like that set up, it's never a snap your fingers. Oh, great, now I have this person here, everything is all done. And we knew that because we had some very positive experience with our previous organization, with our previous VA that we're working with as well. We knew getting this person up to speed and onboarded is really key. And we liked how much support Work Better Now had from your side of things, but from ours, it became okay. And this is what many companies, I think, struggle with sometimes when they bring on a professional of this level, is you have to onboard this person correctly, just as you would any other employee. You have to onboard this person correctly. They have to be managed correctly. You need to support them correctly. Otherwise, they will fail. And if they fail, it doesn't do what you need them to do, and you're just struggling with it some more.
Yeah, no, our clients that are knocking it out of the park with the Work Better Now professionals do what you did, which is really make sure that onboarding is addressed, leverage whatever we can bring to the table. But you just got to tell people, this is really what we need you to do. This is where everything is. This is how things work here. This is what success looks like. Like onboarding any other person. And in a remote environment, when it's a little harder to ask the person next to you, it's even more important. So thanks for being a great client.
Of course. Then the feedback becomes really important to provide to these professionals. I find that becomes really key in a fully remote environment. That people think they're doing well or people think they're doing poorly. And that's frankly not the case. So it becomes, yes, we know we're struggling with this. This isn't because you're failing at this. This is because of an issue we're facing. So please keep doing with this and we'll continue to support you in getting this done. Or this isn't working out well. Let's actually figure this out so we can actually come up with the right solution over here. But that feedback loop becomes really, really important in a remote environment.
Great point. Quick question, just last question on this. How do you communicate with your with Zara?
Email, Teams, phone calls, everything. Same as you would with everybody else. Exactly.
Yeah. Same with us on our side. We're like you. We're 100% remote. This is great, Nelson. Nelson, when you are not working, what do you like to do?
So I have 3 school-age daughters, 2 8-year-olds and a 10-year-old. So they're at the really fun age where we get to take the trips that we really get to see and excite from those types of pieces. We just came from actually a trip down to Washington, D.C., took them around some of the sites over there. That has been fantastic. I actually read a lot as well. I read everything, fiction, nonfiction, business books. So you name it. If it's something that makes sense to read, I will read it. I will often be critical of some of those books, which some people appreciate and some people don't. But I enjoy learning a whole lot more as well.
Awesome. Nelson, thanks for sharing all of this with us. Really appreciate it. Where can people find out more about you and Pro CFO Partners?
Our website, procfopartners.com. We have a lot of content, a lot of information up there, a lot of resources up there. If anyone's just looking to learn more, please feel free to check it out.
Awesome. Nelson, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me and the Work Better Now community. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rob. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Rob Levin, chairman of Work Better Now, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this next episode of Working Better Now. And we're really fortunate today to be joined here by Nelson Tepfer. Nelson is the co-founder and CEO of Pro CFO Partners. Nelson, welcome and thanks for joining.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be here.
Nelson, give us, why don't we start off with a little bit of information on your background? So, how you started your career and how it progressed over time.
Sure. So, it's funny where I find myself today because way back when I actually went to school, I was actually planning on going into finance and Wall Street. And I ended up in small business because when I was graduating and had some offers from different firms, I was like, well, Wall Street's not going anywhere. This business opportunity sounds interesting. Let's see what happens. And I can always go back to Wall Street. And I never made it there. So been in the business world basically my entire career, small to mid-sized companies, from startups through $500 million in revenue. That first opportunity I took, we grew that company to one of the largest in the tri-state area. So I had a great time continuing to grow and scale organizations. Ended up in the CFO title for several different organizations. And then my last full-time CFO role, a friend of mine had reached out to me and said a friend of his is having some trouble with his company. Can I have a conversation, maybe give him some advice, which ended up turning into a year-long interim CFO role, which I truly enjoyed, helping an organization do that. I found the experience and expertise I had was like magic to a company like this. So I found it really engaging to learn a new company, new business, new industry, and be able to provide that insight that will help them continue to grow and scale. So I decided I wanted to do a whole lot more of that. So I started doing this on my own for about 8 years as a part-time fractional virtual consultant, whatever title people are comfortable with at the CFO level. We look at it as part-time CFO because we take on the role of the CFO just on a part-time basis. But I know there's all kinds of fun terminology out there. Did it on my own for a number of years and realized there has to be a way to do this bigger and better. And I went looking and I didn't really like many of the options that existed out there. That just didn't feel they provided much value to the CFO or to the clients. Which as a result led me down the path of co-founding this company, which we launched in January of 2020.
So right before the pandemic. Gotcha. By the way, the reason I was smiling earlier is, and I don't know if you know this, but I actually was a CFO myself 20 plus years ago. And I know exactly what you mean. You can come into some companies that are otherwise well run.
Yeah.
But the financial information is a mess. And probably people like you and I, when you see company with a messy financial situation, you look at it, you're like, how are they making decisions? And somehow they do. But then, of course, when they get access to someone like yours expertise, it's really amazing what they can do. So
it is fascinating to me the similarities and differences of startup companies, 2 million, 20 million, and $200 million companies. The issues that they face, how similar some of them are. Just a question of scale.
Yeah. So tell us. Thanks for the background. Tell us about what Pro CFO Partners does.
So Pro CFO Partners, as I've started to say semi-jokingly, we're a little bit different in our space, even though we shouldn't be. Meaning for us, it is about how do we help organizations build their finance and accounting function. So not only is it systematic,